Welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, wherever you are joining from. It's a pleasure to be hosting this webinar today, Backup for Salesforce, the final piece of the DevOps puzzle. My name is Jack McCurdy. I'm an account executive here at Gearset. I spend my day speaking to Salesforce customers from Fortune 500 companies to smaller startups and everybody in between. Working together, we talk about how to become successful DevOps trailblazing teams, delivering maximum value efficiently to their end users, and hatch plans to do that together. When I'm not talking about Salesforce, I'm a father to a little boy called Teddy, a cat called Bob, and I have a passion for snow sports, particularly the après that follow it. Here's what we're going to cover over the course of the webinar. We'll have a recap of what we know about DevOps so far, the pillars you may already be familiar with, have operated with, have heard of, or maybe even implementing right now. Naturally, as the title of the webinar might suggest, backup, the incredibly important but somewhat forgotten pillar of any DevOps process. Of course, why it is that we need backup, why it's so important, and that everybody needs a strategy. And we'll cover tips and advice for that backup strategy, things to consider, prepare, and implement so that you can go home every night and come in the next day, safe in the knowledge that even if something has gone wrong, your back is covered, especially post-deployment day. So here's the story so far. DevOps, the smooshing together of development and operations, blurring the lines and responsibilities of two traditionally separate teams, aiming to increase the ability to deliver new features and solve critical business issues quickly with confidence. There's a few tight things that a tight DevOps will enable. New releases get to production more often, meaning that your customers, that is to say our lovely end users, sales teams, customer service reps, field agents, etc., are all kept at the forefront of ever-changing business requirements. Lead times on new features are reduced through effective development practices as our fingers are on the pulse to turn user stories into reality faster. Fewer bugs are introduced thanks to robust testing throughout the development process, allowing everyone to stay operational, end users, and of course the development team. And of course, faster restoration for if and when things do unfortunately go south. Now, to prove I'm not throwing some words together and asking you to believe me, there are some statistics to back it up. Google's DevOps industry survey for 2019 showed that high-performing teams that have DevOps processes in place deploy 208 times more frequently and make changes 106 times faster than low-performing teams that don't have one. And particularly pertinent to this conversation today, teams with mature DevOps processes are able to restore service in less than an hour when there are disruptions, whereas low performers reported restore times of between 1 week and 1 month. So that's what we know, broadly speaking. What makes up we know? Version control, your GitHubs, Bitbuckets, GitLabs, enabling faster, contextual, fully tracked, and collaborative development. CI/CD. CD meaning continuous delivery or deployment, depending on your objectives. But this is the glamorous piece, the sexy bit that everybody from developers to CTOs lust after, and the thing that we traditionally think about when we hear DevOps. This reduces the time and manual steps needed to deploy changes throughout your org structure. Automated testing, making sure that service disruptions to end users and the development team are minimal by making sure that you're deploying clean code that is tested robustly throughout that deployment pipeline. And the process, the coming together of all these things harmoniously, giving you a rock solid platform to be at the forefront of those changing business needs and your users' requirements. 4 pillars, ready, waiting, the bits we know. And that leaves us with the final pillar. There's no prizes for guessing what the missing pillar is. The final bit to our complete DevOps Parthenon, backup. Having a solid backup strategy allows for swift and complete disaster recovery in the event that something does go wrong. And believe me, things do go wrong. So backup, why do we need it? As I've already alluded to, things go wrong. I'm sure we'd love to believe in the fairy tale stories of perfect releases, code operating how it's supposed to, integrations behaving, every human interaction with your CRM having best intent. But the reality is quite different. The optimism is fantastic, but here's the thing, you're still going to need a solution, and here's why. A common misconception is that just because things are hosted in the cloud, they're safe. It doesn't matter if you spill your morning cup of coffee over your laptop or you drop it down the stairs, moving from one home office location to the next. The information is secure in the cloud. Get your new laptop, sign in, go again. The inherent risk of information being stored on hardware is gone. And that's partially true. Salesforce, being cloud hosted, does a really good job of mitigating that risk. But Salesforce has two drawbacks in this regard. You might be thinking that Salesforce has a recovery service, and that's true, they do. However, that's only for another couple of months, as it's being retired in July of this year, citing their own expectations of what they offered not being up to their impeccably high standard. That said, it was also never intended to be anything but a last resort anyway, given the 6 to 8 week timeline from request to information retrieval and the high cost of you doing that. Salesforce have also for a long time actively encouraged that you have a third-party backup solution in place as well. The second drawback and the biggest reason that you need backup is this, and it's that disaster happens, and here's how. Firstly, you have accidental deletion. So small accidents can be recovered from. That's why Salesforce has a built-in recycle bin, but it's not all-encompassing and it's pretty small versus the size of your org. What if a field has changed, a phone number, an email address written over, the record isn't deleted and it's not in the bin, it's changed and we need to get that old information back. Software problems. Salesforce developers and admins often share horror stories with each other to learn from each other's mistakes. I'm sure you've come across some horror stories of your own, and if you're feeling brave after this, potentially go have a search online. Take, for example, a situation last year where a bad script was released to a number of Salesforce instances that contained Pardot users, giving all users across the affected orgs to modify all data in an event coined Permageddon. Some of you may still even be having flashbacks from that. Corruption from integrations, usually designed to make our lives easier. Integrations, and especially those that manipulate data, can have the potential to cause you trouble, especially any designed for archiving or removal of data. Remove commands are inherently risky to your orgs. And lastly, data is sometimes deliberately deleted. The fear during Permageddon was that data could have been stolen or deleted by someone who should not have had access, but disgruntled employees have also been known to lash out by deleting data. Devs and admins recommend that when an employee is about to be dismissed, their Salesforce account should be disabled beforehand. Those that have learned the hard way saw users create chaos on their way out of a company from which they had been let go. All of these reasons why point you to the core consideration for why you need backup, and that's the cost. The cost of retrievable and irretrievable data loss can be huge, and we're not just talking of a few dollars of impending revenue. Irretrievable data loss is severe. Not only does the loss of business critical data have a direct impact on your operations and the pennies in your pockets, the damage to your company's reputation and customer confidence is incalculable. Asked to think about what could happen if you lose hundreds of customers' data, losing important, potentially sensitive information that you've been entrusted with. Not only may they walk away as customers, in a world of open feedback, reviews, G2, Google Review, Trustpilot, all those kind of things, how far can that damage spread outside of your customer base? Customers and companies with no backup solution in place or backups that are not tried and tested at restoring data are at risk at that kind of scenario. Then we have the cost of retrievable data loss. Companies with viable backups measure that data loss in terms of downtime, the time taken to restore data to their live environment and recover operational normality. The length of that downtime, let alone the cost, can be quite hard to quantify, since data is often restored over time and the return to business as usual is phased rather than all of a sudden. Different data sets also vary in their value. Some are business critical, others less important, so calculating the cost of that downtime is always going to be a rough estimate. Though it's important not to underestimate the cost of downtime, you need to factor in a few things. Firstly, the cost of work that has not been possible. So this could be closing sales, being able to bill hours to a client for work done, or potentially new features that were due to be worked on or released. The cost of wasted labor, the wages or salaries of the employees who can't do their jobs properly for hours, days, or weeks. And then the cost of additional work that's been created. How much resource do you have to assign to the restoration of data and the length of time that takes? Picture a simple scenario, for example, one sales rep isn't able to close a deal totaling 10K due to an interruption. Your developer takes 2 days to fix the issue. That's one 10K deal. One reassigned developer that was due to work on a new billing workflow that, if released 2 days earlier, could have netted an additional 5K of revenue, and the wages of a non-functional sales rep. It's hard to put a figure on that, and this is a simple example, but imagine scaling that over 10 or 20 sales reps and 5 developers. We need to think about some key things when considering a backup plan, and there's 4 main considerations. The first and most important are your R's, your RPO and your RTO. Your RPO is your recovery point objective. This is the point that you can restore data and metadata from. Should this be yesterday, a week ago, a month ago, an hour ago? How quickly does the data in your org change? At what point does it become obsolete should I need to do a restore? Your RTO is the recovery time objective. How fast can you restore data from your data point loss? How accessible is your metadata and data? How quickly is it to get it back where it needs to be using your chosen mechanism? Number two, with my chosen backup plan, how comfortable will I be on the day I sit down at my desk or when the notification hits my inbox that things have gone wrong, that I can successfully restore my org? Even setting aside our RTO, can I restore critical records to production successfully? Will my stakeholder be able to service their customer again effectively? And if I can't, is my backup fit for purpose? Number three, how secure is my backup solution? If your backups are stored on your local hardware, then you're back to square one, or how secure is my company's cloud solution, etc. And number four, how do I stay compliant with data protection laws? What do I do when I receive a GDPR or CCPA request for erasure? How easy is it to fulfill that requirement and that I can do it within the limits that those regulations set out? Picture a restore of a customer a year after they've requested erasure, and a restore is conducted with their information included, and they're kicked back into a marketing flow or created as a new lead. What might be the implication then? All of that can seem daunting, but you've got a plethora of options to make sure that you have a robust solution in place. So we've considered what we need to be successful. Now it's a case of how to be successful, and these are your options. Option number one is we don't back up. This is more often the case in small or medium-sized companies where backups haven't been discussed or where it's unclear whose responsibility it is. It goes without saying that not having backup isn't a great choice, whatever size of the business you are. Your CRM, regardless of your size, contains vital information that will help you be successful, especially at a startup and scale-up level. You also might not have a backup solution because you're relying on Salesforce to save you, assuming that Salesforce will be able to recover what is lost, but as we've learned, this won't be the case for much longer. We're not in a great position with nothing, so we should move on. You have manual backups. Better than none for sure. It's possible to export data from Salesforce yourself. Backups can be scheduled to run on a monthly basis on most orgs, which will mean they'll quickly become out of date, especially if your RPO is less than a week. You can also run these exports manually too, but again, you're limited to once a week, rendering your backup ineffective if your RPO is less than 24 hours. Your manual exports will only generate CSV files though, which is its biggest limitation. This means that no metadata is downloaded. So any objects, fields, relationships that have been there would be lost and need to be rebuilt from scratch before you can restore that data, unless they have been successfully backed up and successfully restored first. You can use tools like Workbench to download your org's data and metadata more often, but will often need to be done on an object-by-object basis. This can work well, potentially, if you have a small org that isn't that complex, but could end up being days worth of work to do a backup of complex orgs. Or lastly, using a backup solution to back up and restore metadata, which is the safest option. Whilst the upfront cost puts some teams off, it only takes one disaster to get a return on the investment by having a safe and secure, reliable backup history. Salesforce is a unique platform, so you should evaluate backup solutions built for Salesforce. And a backup solution is only as good as its ability to restore your data quickly, reliably, and easily. So be sure to stress test any solutions that you are considering. The Salesforce ecosystem thrives because of the third-party tools developed for the platform. And indeed, the platform has very deliberately been built to facilitate integrations with other tools, and tools for data backup are no exception, even promoted by Salesforce themselves. And with this in mind, I think there's a clear way forward. Backup solution. Notwithstanding my personal bias, of course, but this is looking like our best option. So we've decided that a backup solution is going to be the most complete way to ensure that we're protected from data loss based on our RPO, RTO, and our other considerations. To minimize data loss, the first thing that you're going to need is regular and reliable backups. The first fundamental way that you ensure reliability is this to be an automated process so that you can configure your backup jobs, set it to run, and not have to think about it. Remove that mental load from yourself and automate. Conversely, you'll also want the ability to back up on demand. particularly if you're about to undertake a large piece of work containing risky changes, for example, a large CPQ deployment or introducing data modifying scripts or integrations. Your backup should also be easy to analyze. Backups can be much more than just a backup, and one way for that to be the case is having analytical insight so that you can spot trends in your org's data makeup. Being able to quickly identify data change peaks is critical to ensuring that you spot potential issues quickly. It isn't always immediately obvious when your org's data is missing or changed, so don't rely on your end users sending in big reports of unusual behavior in your org that might have been caused anytime by anything. Bolster that analytical capability by purchasing a backup solution that will alert you to specific data loss or corruption straight away, based on your settings, what you deem important. And the first step to data recovery is noticing that something needs recovering. You'll need smart restoration capabilities. We know that relationships in Salesforce can be complex, with added complexity of data relying on metadata structure. For your restoration to be successful, you need to restore that metadata along with your data. Choose a tool that's best at restoring the whole org, both metadata and data, just as it was. Part of your recovery plan might also involve test restoration to sandboxes to prevent further damage to production. If that's the case, then look for the ability to deploy data and metadata to other sandbox orgs for that purpose. Lastly, you need to trust that your data backup is in safe hands with enterprise-grade security. Thinking about things like, where is my data being stored? Are things like TSL enforced and encryption with strong block ciphers such as AES 256 in place? Does the company backing up my data have recognized security certification? It's likely that you'll also need to think about those compliance issues, GDPR and CCPA regulations. If so, the backup solution will need to be equipped to process requests that customers might make under those regulations and ensure that they aren't mistakenly kept or restored. There's potentially going to be more specific security questions and queries that you might have depending on what your vertical is and where you're based geographically. Once we've covered the what, now it's all about the who. Some companies I've spoken to investigate tools they already use for backup of their existing databases or software, or potentially building their own processes. Based on what we've covered today, these options have some clear drawbacks though. Existing solutions may not be Salesforce specific, and building something in-house will rely on what you can build and keep up to date. Investment that your engineers are probably best focused elsewhere. I've mentioned a couple of times that Salesforce recommend third-party tools specific to the platform to back up your orgs, for which there are a few. Own backup and spanning, for example, spring to mind, though there are more. But of course, this is a GearSet hosted webinar, and I'm biased, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about GearSet. In essence, restoring orgs involves deployments of metadata and data from a backup to a Salesforce org. And GearSet's world-class deployment engine has been honed over 5 years and continues to be to stay at the forefront of trailblazing DevOps, and is used by thousands of people and customers of all shapes and sizes every day. That's why our backup solution can be relied on to restore your data quickly and reliably. If the worst happens, you'll want to restore your org using the Salesforce ecosystem's smartest and most powerful deployment tool. The backup and restore tools we've developed reflect all of the best practices and considerations that I've mentioned throughout this webinar. We've created a backup solution that's easy to use with lots of options for customization and automation. And GearSet has the highest standards for security and is ISO 27001 certified. Our users' data is stored on our servers hosted on Amazon Web Services or AWS. The same data center is trusted by Salesforce and Heroku. But unlike data backup solutions hosted on Salesforce itself, you'll still be able to get your data within GearSet if Salesforce itself is experiencing issues, because GearSet is web hosted outside of Salesforce. Let's take a quick look. Here I am on GearSet's data backup homepage. You notice a nice clean UI that makes it really easy to visualize your job and what has happened here. You can see that I've got a backup of my production environment and my last run was successful. You can see here that this backup job is automated to run at the next point. My job is going to run at Friday, May the 22nd at 1 a.m. my time. You'll also notice that I have the option to run this backup now. If we take a look at configuring a new job, we can give our job a name, specify the org that we want to back up, We can set the time that we want to automate our job for, set notification settings to make sure that you're comfortable that your backup job is running as expected. Select your method of notification there as well. In addition to that, set up some smart alerts. Be notified of anything you deem important changing on a daily basis on a percentage or number-based level, whether that be accounts, records, opportunities, cases, whatever it might be. Make sure that you are notified about that straight away. And you have a filtering option. It may be the case that you want to back up specific items and are only concerned with those specific items to back up. Configure a backup to make sure that you only contain those things and you can keep it relevant, pertinent to what you're looking for. We can view the details of my backup job here on a day-by-day basis. So we'll notice a handy graph here that will help us identify any spikes in any changing data records. This is a day-by-day view of every single run that my job has done in the last 30 days. Gearset has no retention limits. We can go back to all time and a custom range and analyze that data changing. We can go to an object analysis view as well. Account is one of the key things that I'm backing up in my run here. So we can see on a day-by-day basis through each backup run how my account object is changing. We can view here and go back to any particular run and look at the accounts. Take my last backup run, Thursday, this morning at 1 a.m. We can load this back up and look at the records that were deleted, the records that were changed, and the records that were added. Look at any new items, look at those deletions, look at those changes line by line, look at those additions. If we need to revert records or restore records, select them from these viewers, configure a quick restore, or configure a restore to include relationships and dependencies. We have an audit history as well. I've received requests to process deletions based on GDPR and CCPA requirements, and you have a log here. I've completed those deletions and it's stored and recorded here in my history for all time. Gearset makes it really easy and it's really easy to navigate and deploy and make sure that you have everything that you need there to be backed up. And I implore you look at a solution that is configurable and it's going to fulfill the requirements that you have. That's just a quick run through. If you would like to go through this in more detail, then I would be happy to do so. Just give me a shout. Thank you for taking the time to listen and a quick view around the Gearset app there. I'd like to open the floor up to any questions, or if you have any questions that you don't want to ask now, then feel free to email me, jackm@gearset.com. More information can be found at gearset.com/databackup.